So, all right, so here's my contention, which is it hasn't been bad underwriting that's really hurt the industry. I think, first of all, it's the product, which I want to review a little bit with you, that there's some inherent flaws in the product itself. The motivations of both investors and developers, I think, doesn't do the product any good. And finally, what I really believe is that it's operations. And the reason why is because in my roles, with 8 years with Boston Financial, MMA, and then another 6 with Centerline, I've taken in a lot of properties. My current portfolio is about 60, where we've taken over the general partner interest, and I gotta tell you something, every one of those properties, we've been able to clean up and bring out the other side and sell that. So something is going on in between, and my belief is that it's operations. What does this mean for the underwriting folks? I think, given what's going on in today's economy, if it continues going, that most underwriting folks are not going to be underwriting new deals, but rather they're going to be working on workouts. So I'm going to focus a little bit on that. These are my observations, and again, not scientific for all the obsessive compulsive anal retentive quants in the room. It's probably going to be upsetting. But years ago, when I was with Boston Financial, MMA, we did a pretty in-depth study of the entire portfolio. And again, we did another study with Centerline. And this is sort of what I'm seeing. There's nothing that really jumps out at you. Probably some explanations, obviously underperformers in the South and Midwest. I think you'll understand that. Rural underperforming. And I think most of those are just because they're not terribly mature markets and because it's really tough to underwrite this mobile home impact and the 4 folks living in a farmhouse that don't really show up. Building size in units, interesting, underperformed. The smaller deals seem to underperform, or rather the medium-sized deals. That's because the smaller deals in our portfolios are generally Farmers Home, and the larger ones are Section 8 properties. Rehab versus new, again, new construction underperforming. What does all this say? Is there any common factors that end up with deals falling apart? I think, and the answer is no. So, I believe the product creates its own problems, one of which is they're designed to operate close to break even. And what that means is, obviously, that's in good times. In bad times, it performs under break even, and you don't have any cash flow. There's no cushion whatsoever in the operations of most of these properties. And again, we're trying to maximize affordable units, not cash flow. And then I've got this thing about shadow deficits, which an awful lot of the times when we go into a workout or something, you notice that it's not really, it's sort of at 1.10 debt service coverage, and then all of a sudden it fails. And the reason why is I think there have been a bunch of things. Payables have been building. Actually, in most partnership agreements, they allow a deferral of the property management fee. Do I really want a property manager that's not being paid? I don't know. It doesn't seem to make sense. But developer fund deficit funding guarantee. So I think what happens is properties get into terrible trouble, and then all of a sudden they just simply collapse. And then finally what we see traditionally is it's an underperformer for 2 years, then it sort of gets off the watch list because it gets to break even, and then it goes back, and then it goes back. And finally somewhere around year 8 or 9, where your capital improvements can no longer be put off, where you have to replace carpets and stoves and refrigerators, the whole thing starts to collapse. And let's see, Fred talked a little about this. I think, again, we've got a product that basically is competing with market. So it's a market product, same amenities. So what does that mean? Costs are higher. Try to achieve the 10% rent advantage. But again, down here in the smaller ones, leasing is more challenging due to the narrow band of eligible tenants. Absolutely agree with that. Tax credit compliance takes an awful lot of time and energy, equaling dollars, from the management staff. And then finally, and then Fred, you said this again, rents are capped. So what I see is even in good times, conventional product, there's no limit to what they can start charging in rents. And rents can go up and up and up. What we find in affordable is obviously your rents are always going to be capped even in the good times, and then of course your expenses continue to rise. Bottom 2 points I think are important, which is tax credit developers are traditionally focused on new developments because that's where the fees are, not cash flow. And syndicators and investors are focused not on cash flow, but on tax credits. So as a result, nobody focuses on this one thing that keeps you out of the hot water. Conventional. So I was born and raised on the conventional side, and I remember the first meeting in my tax credit world where they were talking about cost overruns, and I said, oh, that's too bad. And they said, oh, no, this is California, you get extra credits. Okay, that didn't seem to make much sense. And then the second conversation was the fact that interest rates were going up, and I said, wow, that's really bad. And they said, oh, no, that means you get better losses. So I immediately realized this business made no sense, and I would probably be successful at it. But if you take a look at this stuff, I mean, there is a little bit more discipline for your conventional developers because returns are solely from cash flow. Here, tax credit, basically 90% of your returns are going to be from credits and losses, not cash flow and residuals. So where's my focus? It's on compliance, not operations. Also, it's interesting, this whole thing, capital at risk, the second point, tax credit allocation. You don't have to be an experienced developer. And as a matter of fact, many state allocating agencies do this sort of social engineering where they say, gee, what I'd like to do is find a nonprofit developer that has no balance sheet and no experience, and we're going to give those folks more points in the system. And then we're going to have a set aside for people that have been unable to house because they have violent behaviors or something like this. And you say, my God, this is crazy. So you end up with this sort of social engineering that I think makes a slice of the tax credit developers and developments inherently weaker. General partner profits and residuals, again, in the conventional side, you as a general partner don't make any money until your property is cash flowing and you can either refinance or sell it. And in most of the tax credit deals, nobody's looking at the back end. Nobody's looking at cash flow, so they're always looking to the next deal to make some money. Okay, here's my belief, folks, which is, you know something? I don't think it's underwriting, not that I let you guys off the hook because I don't like you. No, but seriously, but I do think it's property management 80% of the time, bad sponsorship 18% of the time, and this thing called bad markets, folks, I gotta tell you, I hate that excuse. So, here's a soft market. Now you gotta understand, I'm standing there and